Hello there. Hello, everybody. It's Gemma Zoe Smith here from the Education Hotel. I am hopefully going live. I hope you can hear me. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait until I absolutely know that people are live and that people can see me. So do let me know if you can see me, because hopefully I will recognize that. So just drop me a message down in the comments and let me know. So I won't properly start till I know that everybody is here, because I know that quite a few of you wanted to see the live this evening. For those of you who are watching it on replay, just let me know with a little hashtag replay. And as always, if you've got questions, then you can ask them in the comments. I'll probably get to them at the end. And everyone says that they can see me and they can hear me. I'm just going to check down on my second screen down here. And we should be good to start. Perfect. Brilliant. We're all good. Okay. So thank you very much, first of all, for kind of coming this evening, and hopefully we're gonna discuss how to prepare for the next 5 months if you're doing the 11 plus for 2022. If your child is in year 4, I do have a little bit at the end, but this is mostly for people who are year 5 preps. So don't worry, your time will come. It will be next year. But there is a little bit in there for in case you're doing year 4 prep as well, in case you're really, really keen and you'd like to listen to me on a Tuesday evening as well. So yeah, thanks ever so much for coming. This is my first live this year. So that's a little bit more new for me. So usually I do these on 11 plus journey. And the lovely Saba lets me come in and talk to you all, which is great for me, because I get to share with you some of the things that I enjoy doing with students, and also hopefully is useful for you. So without ado, I'm going to keep going. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Gemma Zoe Smith. I'm an education expert. I run something called the Education Hotel, which is a tuition agency, and something called Top School and Uni, which helps people to find the right schools and the right universities for them. I'm a 3 times Oxford graduate myself, a qualified teacher, and a Royal Society of Chemistry scholar. And now I run a 60-person tuition agency. And I still tutor myself. I work with teens and tweens, and I particularly focus on really highly selective schools. So that's a little bit about me. I've been tutoring for, someone asked me this recently, I think probably about 10 or 11 years, and pretty much from the start looking at 11 plus. So that is a little bit about me, but that's not particularly important. So really the important thing is the question that everyone wants to ask at this point: where should I be now? What should I be doing? What should my child be scoring is a really common one. And I want you to think about 2 things. The first is, where did you start? For some of you, you might have started all the way back in year 4, possibly even younger with this preparation. For others of you, you may have only started a few months ago. So if you're looking and you're thinking, oh, my child's not scoring this percent, or my child hasn't done this or isn't doing this, then my warning comes of comparing your child against others. It can be quite negative for your child to hear how other people are doing. So do think about kind of mental health and about what it's like to compare a child to another, but also think about where you are aiming. So what are you aiming for? Is it a super selective school? Is it a school that actually is mostly catchment driven, and then a little bit of it is put onto 11 plus? And you can definitely ask in the group. I know Saba will be more than happy for you to post in the group if you want to know, what have previous parents done about this school? And there are many parents that we've got in the group who are happy to share what they've done, tutors who are happy to offer advice like I am this evening. But where should you be now? If you were one of my students, we would have finished the syllabus by now. We'd be looking at past paper practice. We would have been doing question practice for quite a while, broken down into smaller topics. And we would be starting to look at climbing our marks is what really I focus on. So achieving consistency and achieving slight increases as we go over the next 5 months. But that does not mean that that is where you should be now, because your child is different and you might be following a different pattern. So the big thing that I think I would want to put forward is focus on your own journey. Your own journey is unique to you and your child, and it doesn't follow necessarily what other people are doing. Some people might be doing lots and lots of mock exams. And I know mock exams is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but you might choose to only do 1 or 2, or indeed none. And that is fine, provided that you are confident with that plan. So I think where you should be now really depends on where you're aiming and where you started. And that is kind of, I know that, for example, lots of people look at exam technique and speed. My students don't look at that until a little bit later. And different tutors have different orders of doing it, and different families have different orders of running the 11 plus practice as well. So focusing on summer term and knowing your child's in year 5, summer term is coming. This comes with kind of the warning, which is looking after mental health. And as we start to move towards these exams, children start to get anxious. And part of that is it's the first time often that they have taken these competitive exams. It's the first time they're possibly going to be put in a room with other children and have to sit down and do these exams. On top of that, they're often going to mocks. So if they're going to mocks, they're seeing other children. It's all becoming quite real at this point. And you're also often increasing the difficulty, and that's something that I work with in my students. We start off with easy papers, and then we increase the difficulty, and we see, can we maintain those marks? So they might feel like it's all getting really hard. In addition, you've got that point where your child has, they've been doing it for a long time. And I know that some of you listening might have been running this program or running on kind of 11 plus prep for 2 years. It gets tiring. And for year 5 students, you've got lots of interesting, fun things happening during summer, which they might feel like, I can't do because I'm doing 11 plus prep. You might find them become disengaged. You might find that they're bored. You might find that they start getting anxious on the other end, that there's tears, that there's arguments. And over this preparation time, the importance that I would want you to think of, first of all, is mental health, because we want to make sure that our child performs the best, because we know that they can do it, but you don't want to damage confidence. You don't want to cause a greater stress than you need to. Now, obviously, taking exams is stressful. That is just the way it is. And if they are aiming for these selective schools, then they're going to do these exams. But I think the thing that I just want you to think about is kind of balance. And often we hear about people who are doing loads and loads of hours of homework, and then they're doing exam practice, and then they've got this and they've got this and they've got these mock exams. And I just think about how much does each bit add? And actually, is there a point where you could maybe keep going? And over summer, the thing that I really recommend is keep going, but maybe at a lower level, or maybe at a level that's a bit more manageable. So as we go through summer term, the summer term becomes a bit of a last kind of push before we reach summer. And summer is, for my students, or at least if you're doing it at home as well, it can be that kind of time that you can spend without school, where you can start to really focus in on what we call the tiny gains. And I call them the tiny percentage gains, because at this point, your child will know the majority of the syllabus. And summer term for year 5 would be all about, Whereabouts are they making mistakes? Whereabouts can I see that maybe we need to go back and we need to go over a specific topic? I mean, as adults, we don't learn everything the first time through. So we wouldn't expect our children to learn everything the first time through. So when they first of all come to do these exams, when they're doing paper practice, or even when they're doing shorter question practice, I would expect that there'd be some topics that a student would struggle a little bit more with. And it would mean that I'd want to go back and I'd want to maybe look at it from a different perspective. So often when I work with students and we're doing, say, math, and I find out, oh, actually, one of the things that they struggle with is algebra worded equations, I'll go back and reteach it, because it might mean that we spend another couple of hours going over it, but it means that they're not going to make that same mistake over and over again, which is going to be demoralizing. So for summer term, I'd be picking up all those little bits. And the way that we can tell that those little bits need picking up is practice. And that can be question practice, that can be part of papers, that can be whole papers. It's more about identifying those topics. And I know lots of people come onto the group around this time and they worry about the percentages that their child is scoring in papers. And for me, the biggest thing should be, where are those mistakes? Not necessarily what percentage are they scoring, because the percentage will increase as you reteach the material, or as you revise the material, or indeed as you work on exam technique within those questions, because there'll be some questions that your child will struggle with. So whether it is something like highest common factor type questions, knowing when two trains leave and one of them takes 15 minutes and one of them takes 12 minutes, when are they both at the same station? That kind of question can be hard. But if you can go back over with your child and you can explain, right, here's the steps that we will use to solve this, and this is the principle behind it, then what you're doing is you're kind of fixing those holes. If you imagine it like a bucket, you've kind of built the bucket, but there will be some little bits that have some little cracks and holes that have started to appear. And summer term is all about making sure that that bucket's nice and secure, which I would call planning the summer. And planning the summer is making sure that when it hits summertime, your child is confident across that syllabus. And that means that they've covered it, but that means one step further. That means that they have covered it and that they've recapped the bits that they need to, that they are confident that each part of a syllabus they can cover. So if they get X type of question, they get a time question, timetable question, can you answer that? Because actually they know the principles, they know the key skills behind it. And in English for comprehension, can they look at the inference kind of questions, usually the hardest parts? Can they read for emotion within a text? Can they work out what a word means that they don't necessarily know based on the whole sentence? So based on the words around it. Those are key skills that, whilst we're kind of building the whole knowledge of 11 plus, sometimes little bits don't quite maybe work out the way we want them to. And as I said at the start, as an adult, you don't expect to know everything first time. So the same thing for our children, making sure that we've recapped, making sure that we've maybe explained it in a different way. If you explain it in a different way, different technique, and making sure that those gaps are plugged. Then we're looking at papers and mocks. And I know, again, I've kind of based this on what a lot of parents like to ask around this time. So hopefully this is helpful for those of you that are watching. So papers and mocks come up all the time. And it typically is a question that we see a lot on the 11 plus journey around this point. And lots of people ask, well, how many should I be doing? When should I be doing them? What type should I be doing? The Education Hotel doesn't really run mocks, so it allows me to talk somewhat more objectively, I suppose, about them. And the things that I've seen that have been useful for parents has been just the physical idea of sitting a mock. Often, if you've got a child who performs really, really well at home, and then they go into a mock and it doesn't go well, then you've been told by the results of your child really what's going wrong. And that means, okay, I'm going to need to focus on what to do in the exam. And I spend a long time with my students working with them on mindset at this point, over summer as well. And we look at, what would happen if. So what happens if I go in there and I have no idea what the question is? They've got a plan of action. What happens if I need the toilet? They've got a plan of action. They've got a plan of action for everything. What happens if I'm running out of time? Plan of action. What happens if I'm really, really nervous and I just forget everything? Because once you leave your child at that school gates, you can't control it. And by being able to do the mocks, you're doing a practice version. So for lots of children, it's useful to do a physical in-person mock because it allows them to feel it, to feel what it's like to sit there, to have people either side of you doing the exam, to have that big clock, to be in that room and to feel what it's like to go through that exam. And that can really be productive for a lot of students because they can realize what it will feel like and they can normalize that in their heads. And often for students who can't do that or who are doing their physical mocks elsewhere, so they're not doing them at the school that they would be thinking of. It's somewhat rarer to do them at the school, but some parent PTAs do run mocks at the actual school. I would also be looking with those students at what's it going to be like on the day. So what's it going to be like walking up to those school gates? Can you think of a time in your mock exams where this happened? Can you think of a time where you needed a drink? Was there a point where you didn't know what you were doing? Was there a point where you had to sit down and do the creative writing and you maybe had no idea what was happening, like what to write on? We work through those kind of scenarios. I know that there'll be some people who'll be watching this who will either be thinking, okay, well, my child maybe isn't of that disposition. They don't need a mock. They maybe don't want a mock. And there'll be some parents who maybe want to do it at home and who don't want maybe the expense of going to a mock or don't want to travel at this point. And there are alternatives. So yes, it's useful. It's useful to be able to see kind of how your child performs often against other children, to see the difference sometimes, the scoring of what they do at home and what they do in a mock exam. You can also get mailed practice papers. So you can get those practice papers sent to you, or those practice papers sent online. Your child can do them under timed conditions and you can send them back and they can be marked. I know that there are providers who offer that. So that way you get that same kind of environment, but you're not physically with other people. So that's the bit that's missing, but you still get the results of it. And often for a student, being kind of having to take the exam under timed conditions, that stress can cause them to lose percentage points. Tiny percentage points, but percentage points. And that's why I think it's useful to get used to these practice papers, to get used to these mocks, but also to give timed papers. And that's more and more as we get closer to the exams, to start really timing those papers and to make sure. And I often offer this piece of advice in the group. I say, watch your child do a mock. And parents kind of look at me slightly strangely, like, I'm going to sit there and watch my child. But what you start to notice is if they're distracted. So if you give them a paper and it's maybe a timed paper and you're going to send it off and get it marked, or you've got the mark scheme, it could be a practice paper for an independent school. It could be one of the kind of packs that you can get, that you can buy, and you sit there and you watch them, or you do it alongside them, or you set up a camera and that records them. You will notice things like if they get distracted. So there'll be a point, possibly at the middle, near the end, where they just start looking around, and that's distraction. And you need to think about how you're going to combat that. It doesn't happen with every child, but it happens with some. You might see that they start really, really quickly and they whiz through the first 2 pages and you're seeing lots of mistakes in the first 2 pages. Well, that tells you going too quick. They're not concentrated, they're not checking their answers. You might find that they don't finish, and that's a really, really important thing to see, because you want to know, well, if they're not finishing, why? So imagine a child doesn't take the last 5 questions. They can't get them right or wrong. And obviously, if it was a multiple choice, I'd always say to a student, just ring an answer, because you never leave an answer blank. But if you're not finishing the paper, you need to look at where they're spending the most time. Is there a certain type of question that they're spending the most time on? And is that impacting the 5 at the end? Could they have actually scored the 5 marks at the end if they hadn't spent the several minutes that they spent answering that one type of question? So the alternatives to kind of papers and mocks, and sometimes those extra bits of information that you get, because in terms of being there during a mock exam, that's not something that's possible. But you can run kind of a simulation at home and run through that as an alternative. Summer courses. Now, this is where I kind of declare the education is running summer courses. And we are running summer courses in kind of 2 different ways. We run a 1-week online course where we focus on a particular topic, so creative writing, English, math, verbal reasoning, and non-verbal reasoning. And then we're running a 3-week intensive, which is only for year 5s. And those year 5 3-week intensives have mock exams in them. They're not physical mock exams. They are the kind of sent out and marked parts. I will be putting some links in the chat, and I will also be offering a call for anyone who's interested in those. But now that we've got that bit out the way, summer courses. Ultimately, your summer is your choice, and I would never tell you that you have to do something. But what I will say, and I will tell the story of what happened when I took 11+ exams. Back in the day, and I went to Chelmsford County High School for Girls. And when I did my 11+ exams, I had a tutor. I actually did group tuition, and we did a group program over summer. And the thing that our tutor always said was kind of, don't leave a massive gap in summer, like a massive gap. And there was a boy in my group who he went away during summer for quite a long time. And I remember this quite clearly, because he was the boy to beat. And I was quite competitive as a kid. I think I probably still am. And him and I was always trying to beat him. And it wasn't, sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. But he really was the boy to beat. And then he went away for, I think, probably like 4 or 5 weeks, I can't remember. But he went away for quite a significant amount of time, or at least in my brain, it was quite a significant amount of time. And during that time, the tutor that we were with ran a summer course, and it was a fairly intensive summer course. And we worked on technique and we worked on timing, really important timing. So a lot of the stuff that we worked on was speeding up for some of the non-verbal reasoning, looking at ways that we can very quickly check our work. And those are the types of things that I put into our summer courses nowadays, because I remember as a student how important they were for me, because I suddenly kind of got it, and I got to the point where I could do it, and I could do it quickly, and I could check, and a lot of that was due to speed techniques, but also knowing what to do when there was an unknown question. So when there's an unknown question to come up, having a method. Anyway, this student came back however many weeks later, and it was about 2 weeks before the exam. And my tutor set us a paper, and he did significantly worse. And the reason for it, and I've come to understand why it sounded like our tutor was being really mean, saying don't take a massive holiday. But he hadn't done any practice whatsoever. And partly during summer, my recommendation to parents is always to do a little bit and to keep it ticking over. And that might mean that if you choose to take a holiday, that you do half an hour of work during that holiday. And that means that the skills are being practiced. It's kind of muscle memory at this point. It might mean that instead of going away for 4 weeks, you shorten that. But as I said, I'd never, we're at the point where we can travel now. And if that's something that you want to do, then work with it. But my advice always to parents at this point is don't leave a massive gap in summer, which is ironic because that's exactly what my tutor's advice to me was, or my parents. So summer courses can be useful. They can also be useful, and often I talk to parents who are interested in our summer courses, and they say, well, I could do this at home. I go, yeah, you can. But they're also useful in being able to boost. You're not the parent at that point. You're not, by the time that you're teaching over summer, it can often become quite strained. You know that there's only X amount of weeks, and it can be quite hard to not pass that on to your child. So sometimes summer courses can be a little bit easier for parents as well, can help you to take a bit of a backseat and to really invest in becoming your child's cheerleader, and help them to navigate that last part of the journey. So summer courses can be useful. There are lots of them. Obviously, as I said, the Education Hotel runs some, but there are many other tutors that do. Some run in person, some run online, ours are online, and some of them run for different amounts of time, and that is great. And it's ultimately about finding what suits you. Likewise, you can do no summer courses. That's also fine. But it is about making sure that you've considered the option and that you know what you're doing over summer, and that if you are going to go away, that you are aware that, okay, we're going to maybe take a week off, but we're going to do that not just before the exam. We're going to make sure that we've got some time once we get back to really make sure that we keep working at it. Or we're going to go away, but we're going to take some workbooks with us, and we're going to do a little bit every day. So do consider what your summer plans would be, and really look forward and think about it kind of maybe a little bit earlier than you might do on a normal school year, mostly because knowing kind of forearmed is forewarned, right? So being able to know what your plan is also helps your child. At this point, as I said, nerves run high, and children pick up on our emotions quite well. And knowing that their summer is sorted and they're doing something, and they've got this course, they've got this, and it makes them feel more secure. And I know for my students, when I say to them, here's the timetable of what we're doing, and this is what you can do on each week. And even if we don't stick to that timetable, because often we might need to flex if there's something that doesn't go to plan, that's fine. But knowing what's coming up can be really important. So knowing kind of the flow of summer and the flow of how it's going to work can sometimes reduce that anxiety. So there isn't this great big spans of time and then, oh my God, I've got my 11+ exam. Instead, there is this very routine kind of, this is what we're doing this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. So do consider your summer holidays maybe a little bit sooner than an usual year. This is a common question that we get. My child's marks are decreasing. What can you do? Well, the first thing is to say that it's normal. There are going to be points where your child does this, and there's going to be points where they do that. And if anybody just went straight up, it would be very unusual. And really the important things to look at are where those marks are being lost. So I've alluded to some of them previously. Is it because they're rushing, and therefore you'll see a lot of silly mistakes in the first couple of pages? Is it that they're speeding up at the end, in which case you'll just see some random guesses at the end? Is it that they're getting distracted in the middle, which typically means they're getting some kind of good marks at the start, good marks at the end, but there's some pepper potted mistakes in the middle. It might not be about the kind of exam taking, it might be about a specific topic. And again, you might not see that in only one paper because different papers are weighted with different topics. So you might not notice it as much. Your child might score an 80% on one paper and then suddenly score 60% in the next. And that's just because that paper is testing more of the topic that they don't know so well. So with that, what I do is I keep spreadsheets where I do this for my GCSE students as well. I clip every question that they get wrong. And I put them all on a Google Doc or on a Google spreadsheet, and I look through them and I see where is that pattern. So I've just been working intensively with one of my students, and what we have done is we have taken every single one of his math GCSE questions and we've put them on a Google Doc. And I can see just from scrolling through anything that he didn't quite get, I can see that immediately he needs to work on sequences. So you might not see that pattern just from one exam or from one practice, but if you start putting them together, you can start to see the topics areas. So that's the second place. So you're looking at how do they tackle the paper, and then you're also looking at kind of what topics are not great. The other one, as I said, is sometimes if you do a physical mock, you'll find that the marks will drop. And that is often because there is something that happened in that physical mock that you've not discussed, you've not maybe prepared for. So is it that at home they are allowed to have whatever pencil they want, and then suddenly in the exam they've got to use the pencil that's provided or the pencil that they bring with them? So they've got one thing, they can't use their glittery pink gel pen that they like to use at home. Even something as small as that can throw a child a little bit. So it is about making sure that you know what you're doing. Maybe they were in a room and they didn't realize how loud it was going to be because everyone else is rustling their papers, and suddenly that's put them off and they're a bit more distracted. So you need to be aware of maybe why those marks are decreasing, as opposed to panicking that they are decreasing. The other thing that comes across is as a child gets freaked out and they suddenly start to panic a bit. And that's why I'd always say we work on a what if principle. So if you notice that one of those exams went badly, and typically this happens, there's one exam that goes badly and your child knows it, and they will come out and say, oh, it went really awfully. And this could be an exam that you've done at home. This could be a mock exam. They come out and they, oh, it went really badly. And you want to know really why. Sometimes it can just be that they panicked. They panicked, and had they calmed themselves down, they would have been fine. But instead, they didn't know how to calm themselves down. So sometimes, often actually, I work with my students on ways to make sure that you're grounded through the exam. So just ways that you can reset yourself. So one of the things that I think I might have taken it from someone else, but I go for kind of a couple of seconds up, a couple of seconds down, big deep breath, and pick the pencil back up. And that's just a little routine that my students will do if they're stuck in an exam. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3 down, big deep breath, and we pick the pencil up, we put a random one in, move on, start the next question, circle it, go back to it. So consider if you've done that. We've got a great question. How do we avoid silly mistakes? Silly mistakes, you'll never completely eliminate them. And I don't know of anyone who's ever managed to completely eliminate a silly mistake. What you can do is make sure that your child is checking the right things. And that doesn't mean checking that they have put an answer. That means checking the actual question. And checking can be very hard because there's that part of our brain that goes, well, I've done this before. Like, I'm not, like, why would I do it again? I've already done that task. And often when we're doing an exam, it can be it can sometimes be a choice of doing that question that you spent 3 minutes on and you didn't think you got the right answer, or checking the whole first page. And that's why knowing where those mistakes are, where those silly mistakes happened, can often help. So if you've taken your child's papers and you've looked through them or practices, and you know that actually they tend to make 2 or 3 or 4 silly arithmetic numerical errors right at the start of that paper because they've rushed it, and that's where their silly mistakes are, then at the end of the paper, tell them to go back and do those first 2 pages again, or undo the answer. Undoing the answer is something I like to work with my students on. It's where we, instead of, for example, if you had to do 42 plus 31, then you would take your answer and minus the 31 and check you get your original. It means you do it slightly differently, and it means you're not just doing the same sum and your brain's not going to sleep. Make sure that they're sense checking the answer. If you do 31 plus 42, you wouldn't expect to get 200 and something. That's definitely gone wrong somewhere. So sense check and make sure that they're going back to where they would normally make those silly mistakes. If they're right at the start, that's where they're going to put their additional time once they've finished. And part of that is having additional time once you've finished. And that means really mastering going through the paper. And that kind of avoiding any distraction, avoiding any points where maybe they don't know how to do it. It doesn't necessarily mean speeding up. Some students like to use kind of a math trick. For me, I won't introduce a kind of math tip or trick until a little bit later. Usually in our summer courses, we do it. And that is because mastering the kind of the actual technique is more useful for a lot of my students, because it can be great to have a multiplication tip or trick to check, but for many of our students, that is additional things to remember. It is also a place where they can make a silly mistake. They're rushing it. They're trying to do it using this new trick, and it maybe brings in mistakes. So often accuracy and speed is the 2 things that we're aiming for. It sounds like if there's silly mistakes, there might be some accuracy that needs to be looked at. This one, how to maintain motivation. And it's something that we get a lot. And it's, as I said, I've worked as a tutor for over 10 years and taught 11 plus for almost all of that. Motivation will decrease over summer because, let's face it, for your child, there will be prep work. And for some children, maybe in the same school, maybe their cousins, maybe their siblings, there won't be. And it can be really hard to try and do your work when outside there are people playing football, or there are some, that people coming around and asking if you want to play, or everyone's going out, but you can't. So maintaining motivation can be really important. And kind of going back to the idea of papers and worksheets, all of that can be quite heavy. So often over summer, some of the stuff that I do with my students is we start to do a little bit more them teaching me, for example. And they quite like that because it means that they're in control, but also it's a great way for me to check that they know something. So if I've seen in practice papers or in worksheets that they're maybe not 100% confident on a topic, I will say to them, right, you're the teacher, you're going to teach me. Or we'll play a game related to it. Or we will, instead of doing a full creative writing, we'll do some little sentences. So I've got a game that I do with my students where I've got a bag full of stuff and I pick something out and we've got 5 minutes to write about it. And in that bag, there could be anything. So sometimes I'll pick out a calculator. I'm going to write a whole 5 minutes about a calculator. But they can be a little bit more imaginative. We can start to look at the use of vocab, the use of techniques in there. And it is similar to a creative writing, but it's on much shorter level. So consider about how to maintain that motivation, and also consider kind of where's best to put the work. Is it necessity to do more hours, Or is it actually that doing shorter hours but more targeted work is the best way forwards? So do consider, is it worth spending all of this time when actually a couple of hours is all you really need? So maintaining motivation. I know that there are plenty of tutors out here who will also offer some advice on that. But other things that I do, I plot my students' grades once they are high enough. Once it is, once they are kind of past that initial kind of bumpy road often, and if they're increasing, I'll tell them. I'll say, oh, look, last one, you got this. I won't always share it with them, but if they've improved a lot, I will. Sometimes I'll show them something we worked on 2 years ago. Say, look at that. Look at how different your writing is. Look at how different your creative writing is. Look at how much better your grammar is right now. So always kind of encouraging them to do their best, and telling them and really being there as a cheerleader. And if you're speaking to other parents of 11 plus in their vicinity, build your child up. So I would never in front of them, in front of any other child, put your child down. Your child is trying the hardest that they can, and that deserves to be celebrated. So do make sure that that positive message is coming through, and also that you're scheduling in breaks and that you're scheduling in fun stuff to do as well. Small percentage gains. Ultimately, once you hit summer term, those are what you're going to be looking for. And that might mean a couple of percents. So you've got this kind of trajectory, whereas it might be a bit variable, where you should be going up and the difficulty should be going up. But there's going to be a point where you start to plateau. And often that's where a student will stick. But you want to be looking at those small percentage gains. And again, that is something that I think quite a lot about when it comes to summer. And I know that we include in our summer courses is those extra little tiny percentages. So, being able to know what questions to check, knowing where your strengths and your weaknesses are, those can be a little percentage gain, because you can go, I'm going to check this part right here of nonverbal reasoning, because this is the bit that I typically lose a mark on, or a couple of marks on. Making sure that the speed is right, that can be another couple of percentage. Making sure that you are absolutely, you've read through that comprehension and understood it, and you're not just jumping straight in, and you're not just going and answering the first thing that you say. That can be an extra couple of percent. So really, as you move through this term and you move to summer, start thinking small percent, because that's what we want to do. Now, there might be some of you watching this going, Gemma, you're talking about all of this and I haven't actually I haven't finished the syllabus. If you started preparation late, you'll be on a slightly different timetable, and that's fine. Okay, you started later, so make sure that the syllabus is covered. Make sure that you know kind of where your child is at. You might want to run some practices at the same time, but I would always say make sure the majority of the syllabus is covered. But if you're worried, then one of the easiest ways, and I often take students who are very late preparation, and one of the things that I found useful for them is I take the first page off of a practice paper. Usually I tell them that I photocopied it from somewhere, and I give them it, and I will say to them, we're going to do it in an hour, and I give it to them, and they don't necessarily know it's a paper. And often that gives me a really good idea of what they know and what they don't know. So if your child's getting worried because maybe you started a little bit late and you're thinking, oh, how do I get them to do a bit of practice, or how do I know where they are? Take the first page off of a paper. I don't mean the first questions. I mean literally the cover page, and give them that, and say to them, oh, let's see how much we can do it alongside them. How much can we do in an hour? And you'll see where they're happy and where they're not so happy. So is it that they can actually get through 80% of a paper? And actually there's a couple of topics in there that maybe you weren't sure that they knew, but they do know. That can always be a useful tip to make sure that you can kind of run into practice a little bit more. All right. Now, if you are a year 4 parent and you've sat through all of my waffling for the last 45 minutes, I will finish soon, I promise, you're going to be looking at planning ahead. And the reason I popped this in was just I get a lot of year 4 parents asking me about this time of year. You know, do you run something for year 4? My child's in year 4 and we want to do something over summer. Do your summer courses work for year 4? The answer is yes. Please do reach out. But if you are a year 4 parent and you are wanting to keep stuff going over summer, then keep stuff going over summer. But make sure that you have planned ahead. So make sure you know with your child where you plan to be at each kind of point. So when they go back in year 5, are they going to be ahead of where everyone else is? Are they going to be looking at papers? That would be very early in my book, but some people do it. Some people will start papers when their child starts year 5. That is something that occasionally does happen. For me, I like to start practice papers a little bit later. Typically, my students will work on them from anything from January to around now is the starting point for full practice papers. Typically, when we go into year 5, most of my students will have done probably around 3/4 of the syllabus. So we'll only be doing maybe that last quarter, sometimes even less, sometimes like a fifth, sorry. And we'll be looking over those last possible parts. So if you are thinking about summer for year 4, it can be a great time to deep dive into that topic that they don't know so much about. So maybe you've put off nonverbal reasoning and that's something you're going to do over summer. Maybe creative writing. So creative writing can be a great thing to work on over summer. You've got that more intensive time. So being able to go out and write stories and tell stories, or if you're looking at nonverbal reasoning, we've got all the different types of nonverbal reasoning questions. It can now be the type to look at each version of that. So definitely you can keep stuff going over the summer term and into the summer holidays as well. Again, just a recap of make sure that you maintain that balance, especially if you're year 4, you are going to need to be still doing another year. So just make sure that that balance is nice and key, and that you're not doing quite such an intensive preparation over summer. I think that's pretty much it for me, and I'm aware that I've gone on quite a long time. For anyone who is looking for summer courses, I am running a call. I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about it. Hopefully, I have answered some of your questions over what to do over the next couple of months. As always, thanks ever so much to Saba, who graciously allows me to do these lives and puts me on every couple of weeks, and that's really great for me and hopefully great for parents. Also, if you've got more questions, please do ask. I will scroll through the comments section in a little bit, and if you're watching on replay, feel free to ask questions as well. I will always come back and scroll through those comments. In terms of if you've got individual questions that you want advice on, do post on the 11+ journey. That is what we're here for. We're here to help. We're here to try and offer as much advice as we can do. And that should be it from me, really. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I hope you've all found it useful. And that's all. Thanks ever so much, guys. Bye-bye.